In the last episode, we reached the hinge of 1933. Weimar collapses through emergency, institutions fail, Hitler is appointed. Now Preparata moves into the 1930s themselves, the years in which the Nazi regime consolidates power, rearms, and Europe drifts once again toward catastrophe. This chapter asks the following questions. Why was Hitler tolerated? Why was he negotiated with? Why was rearmament allowed to proceed? Preparata's answer is provocative, because Hitler, in his telling, was not merely feared, he was useful. One of the undeniable realities of the 1930s is the rapid militarization of Germany. The Versailles limits are cast aside. The army expands. The Luftwaffe emerges. Industry is reorganized towards war. Preparata treats this not as a spontaneous German miracle, but as a process enabled by international conditions, credit flows, industrial collaboration, diplomatic tolerance. The question is not whether Germany rearmed. It did. The question is why this escalation was not stopped earlier, and whether some circles preferred to redirect German power eastward rather than confront it immediately. Appeasement is often remembered as cowardice, a moral failure, Neville Chamberlain deceived. Preparata's reading is different. He suggests that appeasement was not simply weakness, it was also calculation. The Western establishment, he argues, viewed Hitler as a bulwark against Bolshevism. The Soviet Union was the deeper fear. Thus, tolerating German expansion, at least for a time, was interpreted as a way of channeling aggression eastward. Now, historically, this is contested terrain. Motives were mixed. Exhaustion from World War I, economic weakness, fear of another slaughter, strategic confusion, ideological anti-communism. Preparata emphasizes the last element intensely. He sees appeasement as part of a geopolitical design. Here we come again to Preparata's core idea, that Hitler was conjured not merely for German purposes, but for imperial geometry. Britain's nightmare from the beginning was the Eurasian heartland, the possibility of Germany and Russia aligned. Preparata argues that Hitler becomes the instrument for preventing that alignment, a force unleashed against the Soviet East. Thus, the Nazi regime is interpreted as more than German nationalism. It becomes an anti-Russian battering ram. This is the darkest part of Preparata's thesis, that Western elites believed that they could unleash reaction, direct it, and then contain it. History suggests otherwise. One of the recurring tragedies in modern politics is the belief that extremists can be managed, that demagogues can be boxed in, that violence can be harnessed for strategic ends. Preparata's account is, in part, a story of elite miscalculation, not necessarily omnipotence, but arrogance. The conjurer believes he controls the spell, but the monster has a will of its own. By the late 1930s, appeasement collapses. Hitler's ambitions are not limited enough for the British. War becomes unavoidable. And this system discovers that what was tolerated as an instrument cannot be contained as instrument. Hitler was not simply a puppet. He had agency, ideology, ambition. The Nazi regime pursued its own program of conquest and supposedly extermination. Even if one rejects the strongest intentional framing, the structural lesson remains. When elites tolerate extremism as a tool, they gamble with civilization. Even if one rejects the strongest intentional framing, the structural lesson remains. When elites tolerate extremism as a tool, they gamble with civilization. So Chapter 5 brings us to the edge. Germany rearms, the West negotiates, appeasement functions as illusion and strategy, Hitler is treated as instrument against the East, until the instrument becomes uncontrollable. In the next episode, Preparata moves into the final descent, 1939 to 1941, the outbreak of war, the collapse of containment, and the unleashing of total catastrophe. Because the conjuring is complete, and now the world must live with what has been summoned.